Okay guys, so it's time for yet another reel customization slash tuning video. And I'll tell you what, unboxing the latest and greatest JDM reels is all fine and dandy, but this type of video is quickly becoming my favorite because it's definitely more fun and more rewarding at the same time. Now I've done this to 3 different reels in the past, and I have them out in front of you right now. And let's talk about the first one I did. And that was my 2013 SHIMANO METANIUM. Now this build turned out to be pretty much all cosmetic, as I've replaced several of the stock components. I replaced the handle, the nut retainer, the nut, the knobs, the knob end caps, the drag star, spool tension. And I even replaced a lot of the screws with these gold screws. And I even replaced the bearings with some hybrid ceramics, but they actually gave no performance increase over stock. Now this build probably cost over $300 total for all the parts. Now the second build was purely performance with a goal in mind. And that was on the 2016 SHIMANO ALDEBARAN BFS reel. Now the goal for this was to create the ultimate bait finesse reel with the intention of being able to cast this lure right here, the 1 gram trout magnet. Now to achieve that, I got the lightest spool in the world at the time. I upgraded one of the bearings to some micro hybrid ceramics, and I upgraded the brake magnets. As you can see, there are no cosmetic upgrades to this reel, and the goal was to actually cast that trout magnet at least 30 feet, which I blew past, and this reel can cast that trout magnet at least 50 foot on the right rod. So this was a very satisfying build because we greatly exceeded the goal. Now the last build was probably just as fun and satisfying as the ALDEBARAN build, and that was to the $99 Abu Garcia REVO X. Now the goal was to turn this $99 budget bait caster into a top performing bait finesse reel for half the cost of the reel, and if you saw that video you'll know that I succeeded with flying colors. So basically what I did was I replaced the stock spool with a spool that was intended for the Abu Garcia Black Max. As you can see, it's very ported, very shallow, very lightweight. The spool was $20. I replaced the bearings with some $10 hybrid ceramics. I replaced the handle with this lighter carbon fiber one that has more finesse style knobs. And I also replaced the nut retainer with this decorative piece. So all the pieces together costed only $48. And the performance is just jaw-dropping. I would actually put this reel up against any stock BFS reel in the world and wouldn't be surprised if it beat them. So this was very fun and very satisfying to do. Now this time around it's Daiwa's turn, and we're going to try to create the ultimate Daiwa bait finesse reel. Now a lot of you may know that when Daiwa announced the new Steez Air that I was very excited and I planned on getting one, but unfortunately with the spool weight and also the performance of that reel that I've seen in all the videos I've watched, there was nothing that led me to believe that that reel was worth the money, or that it could be able to cast this lure right here, the 1 gram trout magnet. Now fortunately Daiwa is coming out with the Alpha's Air TW, and it looks like it's going to be having the same spool as the Steez Air at probably almost half the cost, so I'm definitely getting one of those when it comes out. But up until then, we are going to be creating our own ultimate Daiwa bait finesse reel. And the original plan was to make my own Steez Air, starting with my own personal 2016 Daiwa Steez SVTW. Now, when I was shopping around for a shallow BFS spool for the Steez, I was pretty disappointed at the options. I think there was only maybe 2 out there, and they were from KTF And then there was the RORO spools from AliExpress. Now when I was researching the spools, I realized something, and that was that there was a better reel out there for this build. Enter the Daiwa T3. And this particular model is the T3 Ballistic. Now when I was researching spools for the Steez, I realized that any spool that could fit in the Steez would fit into this reel right here. And you're probably wondering, why would I pick this reel over the Steez? And the answer is pretty simple. This right here, MagForce 3D braking. This is probably Daiwa's most advanced braking system they've ever made. Now ever since I've been doing bait finesse videos, I've gotten tons of people telling me, you know, get a Daiwa T3 Air, get a T3 Air. Now, unfortunately, you know, nothing about the T3 Air and its performance warrants the cost of that reel. It doesn't perform any better than any other top performing BFS reel out there right now. And I know that because I've watched pretty much every video on it. And I also have the Daiwa SS Air, which has the exact same spool as the T3 Air. So basically, I decided to take matters into my own hands, and we're gonna create our own T3 Air budget style. Now, for those of you who are kind of younger and you don't know anything, this was the first reel that featured Daiwa's T-Wing system, but they implemented it in this pop-up hood. Now, I will admit that the T3 Air is probably Daiwa's most technically advanced and feature-packed reel, but for almost 500 bucks and a reel made of Zion, I definitely was not going to spend the money for one. So I actually only bought 3 pieces for this build, but that should be more than enough. And of course, since this is a budget T3 Air, I didn't want to spend, you know, hundreds of bucks. So let's show you the parts now. Now, since the original T3 Air was the first BFS reel that came with micro bearings stock, that was the first part I bought. That was a set of hybrid ceramic micro bearings. And let me pull these out for you and show you what they look like. As you can see, these have a red housing. And if you're familiar with Hedgehog Studios, they sell a set of Air micro BFS bearings that look pretty much exactly like this. Wouldn't be surprised if they're the same ones. But let me show you the importance of micro bearings for bait finesse. So this is a standard ball bearing. As you can see, it's got an open side. You can see the size of the balls in there. Now here's the micro bearings, and hopefully you can see in there that the balls in the micro bearings are much smaller, so it's going to take less inertia to get this bearing spinning, which is very important, especially for these super light lures. So that's the importance of having micro bearings in a bait finesse reel. Now, if you're wondering why there's 4 bearings in the bag, these 2 bearings are actually going to be going into a Scorpion BFS for distance testing. So be on the lookout for that video in the future. Okay, so the next piece is probably purely cosmetic more than anything, but I picked up a carbon fiber handle and skeletal knob set, and let me show you what this thing looks like. Now the handle itself, while it is a pretty funky shape, the carbon is, you know, not that great a quality, but the knobs are really impressive. They're machined aluminum. They are very smooth, very nice to the touch, and you can see they're skeletonized just like the knobs on the T3 Air. In fact, let me show you what the knobs on the T3 Air look like, because they're the same knobs that come on my SS Air. Now, there was a knob and handle set on AliExpress that looked closer to this than this set, but I went with this set because I think it was lighter and definitely looked better. So knob and handle set. Hopefully that'll reduce the weight. Okay, so the last and most important piece, of course, is going to be the spool. And this is a RORO spool from AliExpress. And take a look at this thing right here. It is super ported, super shallow, and it's only supposed to weigh 5.5 grams with this bearing. Now this bearing is a micro bearing, so I wish I would have known that before I ordered the other bearing, but oh well. So basically, if you take the bearing off, this spool has the potential of being under 4 grams in weight. Now the original T3, the spool was 6.8 grams after you take the bearing off. So this is a big upgrade. It should blow away a standard T3 when it comes to casting light lures. Now, interestingly enough, the rotor on this spool is fixed, it doesn't move. So that should create a more linear break profile, very similar to what Daiwa did with the Alpha's Airstream Custom, where they made the rotor pretty much just a mag force rotor. It doesn't move at all, doesn't go in and out or twist. So yeah, this was a very important piece in this ultimate Daiwa budget T3 Air build. All right, let's get started. Now the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna get some weights. That's going to be of the stock T3 ballistic, and also we're going to get a weight on that spool. Okay, so the stock T3 ballistic feels pretty heavy, and I forget what this thing is supposed to weigh, but it says 7.7 ounces. Hopefully you guys can see that. And I think a lot of that weight is this heavy handle and knob assembly. These knobs are very big and very clunky. So remember that, 7.72 ounces. Okay, so let's get a weight on this spool. And with the bearing, it weighs 5.47 grams. So that is super light. And of course, because I am OCD, I'm gonna remove this bearing and see what the true rotational mass of this spool is. Okay guys, so I managed to get the spool bearing off, and I'll tell you what, I don't know what this shaft material is made of. It feels plastic. It may be aluminum covered with plastic, but as you can see, this spool has very little material in the center there. All right, so let's see what this weight is without the bearing. 4.5. So the bearing was only about a gram. So this is still a slight bit heavier than the ALDEBARAN BFS Ultimate Bay Finesse spool, which weighs about 4.2 to 4.3 grams. But hopefully with the MagForce 3D, that will compensate for that slight weight gain. So that's good to know. So now that we got all the weights and measurements out of the way, let's start off by replacing the handle first. Okay, so the screw is off, and just move this piece of plastic here. And hopefully one of these ends of this wrench will fit. Nope, that won't fit. That one fits, okay. There's a whole lot of grease on this thing. Okay, so hopefully I have a nut that will fit on a Daiwa to replace that one, because it was open-ended and it's not like a standard nut that goes on the handle shaft. It's gonna pull this handle off, and there a washer went flying off there. Gonna hang on to that, but comparing the weight It may not be as much of a weight savings as I thought for this carbon one, but it's definitely going to look better. Okay, so moment of truth. Now, full disclosure, when I ordered this handle and knob set, I was supposed to specify whether I wanted a, handle that fit a Shimano or a Daiwa or Abu, and I forgot. So hopefully they sent me one that fit for a Daiwa, and I think it probably will work, because from what I've seen of other vendors that are selling this handle, if they sent you one that fits a Shimano, it would have come with like a little bracket there that allows you to put it on Shimano's smaller handle shafts. So I'm going to remove this retainer, put that down here. Let's cross our fingers, because if it doesn't work, I'm going to have to wait probably 3 or 4 weeks for another handle to come in. And yes, it fits. It's a perfect fit as well. So now I'm going to rummage around and see if I can find another nut for this T3. Okay guys, so I made the executive decision to go ahead and cannibalize a nut off of my Hybo Steed, which I'm not using, and yeah, this is how it looks. Now I wish I had a red retainer, but I gotta work with what I got, and the retainer on the Hybo Steed was red, but it wasn't long enough to fit this handle. But I think it came out very, very good. It kind of breaks up a lot of the red, but yeah, feels good to me. Now there were some aftermarket spool tension knobs for the T3, but I like the look of the stock one. Now it is plastic, but it does click, and it has these really fine micro clicks. And of course it's got that little red insert in the center that looks really, really good. I don't think I need to change that out. So now that we got the handle swapped out, it's time to swap out the palm side plate bearing. And to do that, you just press this button and you slide this down. And this is going to be a great chance to show you guys the MagForce 3D brake system. So with your standard MagForce, of course, you got your 20 or 21 settings with the external dial. Now with MagForce 3D, you actually have 3 extra main settings, and let me show you what they are. You can see it's got the all around, you got your max brake, and then you got your long cast. And you control that with this little lever here. So let me show you what this lever does. So right now I believe it's on long cast, so we're going to go to all around. You can see this brake assembly got closer to the spool, and then we're going to go to max brake. As you can see, it got even closer to the spool. So you got your max brake, which gives you the maximum amount of braking, your all around, and then naturally your long cast. The magnets will be the farthest away from the spool. So within these 3 main settings, you can still use the external dial to fine tune. So this is why I believe the MagForce 3D is Daiwa's best braking system they've ever made. But let's swap out this bearing right here. All right, there we go. And I believe that is replaced by this bearing right here. Perfect fit. Just put the retainer clip back. Oh, almost lost it there. I'm going to do this with my hand. Okay, I believe that's it. Hopefully that's sitting right. I don't want that thing to pop out. Doesn't look like it's flush, but we're gonna roll with it because it can't go in there any farther. Okay, so last thing of course is we have to replace this heavy spool. This thing weighs a ton. I can actually feel the weight on this thing. You don't want to get hit in the head with one of these spools. Now I don't know what it weighs, but I'm not gonna bring the scale out to weigh it, but we're gonna pop this RORO spool in, and then we're going to put the side plate back on. Okay guys, so are you ready to see the budget T3 Air in its final form? Pow! Take a look at that thing. Now the standard T3 ballistic was no looker in my opinion, but when you stick this carbon fiber handle with these red knobs to match the insert on the spool tension, and then of course match it up with the red super shallow honeycomb spool, I think this thing looks stunning. I'm really glad I went with the choice of the red knobs with the carbon fiber handle instead of the handle assembly that had the more traditional looking air knobs. Look at that thing. Now one thing I wanted to say is the instructions for this particular spool say not to use it in the max brake mode. And I think that's because of the fixed inductor that's stuck all the way out. It may rub up against the magnet assembly in max brake mode, but let's test that theory. So I'm going to set the spool tension to just minimize the side-to-side play. I really love these precise clicks on this T3 spool tension knob. Reminds me of the original T3 that I had. So there's just a minute amount of side-to-side wiggle. And now I'm gonna switch over to max brake. And it's fine to me. I don't feel any rubbing. As you can see, it spins pretty freely. So yeah, my particular spool works in the max brake mode. So that's very, very promising right there, because when you're trying to cast a 1 gram trout magnet, you need all the brakes you could get. Now let's try it in the all around mode. As you can see, it spins even longer. And let's try the long cast mode. Oh, there's a nasty sound there. I wonder what that is. Okay, it seems to have gone away, but when I tilt it on its side, sometimes it makes a clicking noise. It's got to be the bearing. But it looks like it's okay as long as I keep the spool level when I'm casting, which I do anyway. So yeah, there we go. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to see if the budget T3 Air lost any weight. Now if you recall, the standard T3 ballistic weighed like 7.7 ounces, and I can't really tell if it lost any weight because I wasn't really paying attention, but the budget T3 Air weighs 6.88, so pretty much 6.9 ounces. So it lost almost 1 ounce of weight, so that's pretty impressive. And of course that came down to this handle assembly and probably this spool, because I believe the stock spool, which I have right here, weighed 18.1 grams. So yeah, this RORO shallow spool definitely was a contributing factor in the weight loss. Now it's still probably about 1 ounce heavier than the real T3 Air, but for this build I am very, very pleased with the results. So the next thing we're going to talk about is the total cost of all these parts. Now the spool was of course the most expensive at $62, and the handle and knob assembly, even though they look high dollar, it only cost $15. And the bearings costed $16 for the set. So you're looking at a total of $93 total for this budget T3 Air build. Now of course that doesn't include the cost of the T3. Now luckily I had a generous subscriber send this in to me, but I'm not sure what the T3s cost on eBay these days. But I do know if you want to cut costs, you don't need this handle and knob assembly. Okay guys, so let's take a moment to talk about this spool for a moment. Now if you're interested in this spool, I'm going to put up a graphic of all the reels that this spool will fit into. So as you can see, it'll fit pretty much all the Steez models, the ZILLION, SV, I believe the RYOGA 1016, and as well as the other T3 models except for the T3 Air. But I do want to show you guys something. Now I pulled out my Steez. I'm going to show you the fitment of this spool in my Steez. So as you can see, it seems to fit, but it is very, I guess, lopsided. You can see that the edge of the spool is clearly showing much more on the right side versus the left. Let me see if I can put the side plate back on. Okay, seems to work. Let me see if I can... yeah. The side plate will fit, but the latch will not close all the way. And that tells me that for this spool to work in the Steez, you'd have to loosen up the zero adjuster, which I said that I wouldn't touch on any Daiwa reels that have this. I'm leaving it as it was set from the factory. So just want to let you guys know that if you're looking at one of these spools for your Daiwa Steez or any reel that has the zero adjuster. So it looks like potentially the ultimate Daiwa bait finesse reel could be a homemade budget T3 Air with a bunch of AliExpress Chinese parts. Now I know that will butt trigger a lot of the JDM snobs out there, but I really don't care. And I know there's a lot of people who are probably going to say, well, there is a RORO spool for the Steez CT as well as the other CTs that is even lighter than this spool right here. Now I am very aware of that spool. I probably knew about that spool long before you did, but I will say this, none of those reels have the MagForce 3D brake system. But if you're generous enough and want to send me either of those three reels, I will buy that spool and we can see what's what. So to wrap this video up, the next step is going to be, of course, take the budget T3 Air out on the water, and I'm going to mount it on the Kuying Teton rod, and we're going to see if this thing can cast a bare 1 gram trout magnet. And what I probably will do as well is I'm going to bring out the current ultimate bait finesse reel, and we may have a little casting comparison to see which one of these reels handles the trout magnet easier and of course farther. Now if it turns out that the budget T3 Air is the winner, I did buy one of these. But that's for another video. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed the build of the budget T3 Air, and be on the lookout for the casting impressions of this reel. Alright guys, thanks a lot.